win for the African American voters in Alabama. It was a win for democracy itself. The court ruled that the protections of the Voting Rights Act required the Alabama's legislature to redraw its congressional districts. It is about making sure that every American's voice in this democracy is heard. We know that fair representation matters. We also know that the amazing foot soldiers, many unknown, but we know of John Lewis, really gave sacrifice for the right of every American to have an equal voice in our democracy. And I feel as if their struggle, their sacrifice was rewarded today in this very historic decision. When I think about what lies ahead, I think that the work still continues. We still have not fully restored the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I fully expect to once again file in Congress the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which bears the name of the late but great John Lewis, who is always our North Star when it comes to voting rights. I've received numerous calls from leadership, from people across the nation, because I think that they understand that this decision just is not about Alabama, that the decision to take into account minority voter dilution as one is considering redistricting and the drawing of lines is a historic decision that will affect not just the state of Alabama, but will also affect North Carolina, Ohio, and I dare say a lot of the southern states where the African American population is in excess of 25%, and there's only one majority minority congressional district. So look, a lot of work still lies ahead. I am still processing this decision, but the fact that the Supreme Court really ruled in favor of protecting the voices of minority voters is something to be celebrated in this great democracy.
All right, thank you. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and use that raise hand feature. We have a question from Aaron Davis from WSFA. Aaron, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, yes, Aaron Davis, WSFA. I had a question. I was wondering, Congresswoman, do you have an idea of where you would like the second district to go, where you can see it being drawn in Alabama?
The court will decide that. So in the Supreme Court's decision today, they remanded the case back to the same three-judge panel to make them draw the lines, or at least review the lines if they're drawn by the state legislature. So look, I feel with a unanimous lower court's decision that we're in good hands to get a good outcome. I think that we have to continue to fight for fair representation. So the drawing of the lines will obviously be critically important. I think first and foremost, we must ensure that at least one district is truly a majority minority district. And that's going to be important to make sure that we do that as well. Look, I've enjoyed representing the amazing district that includes so many of the historic civil rights sites and places. But I know, and I've enjoyed representing the majority of the Black Belt. I grew up in the Black Belt. I'm a daughter of the Black Belt. But in order to create another district that is where minority voters can actually choose a representation, would require breaking up the Black Belt. I've always been concerned about that because I think it's really important that rural America, rural Alabama, gets strong and fair representation as well. But I have to, progress demands that you make sacrifices, and this is a small price to pay to get fairer representation in the state of Alabama.
We have a question from Tristan Rupert. Tristan, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
I understand this is going to go back to that three-judge panel that you discussed, but from a timeline, do we have an expectation of when this new district could be thing in Alabama. What are your hopes for that? And when could we perhaps see that representation changed?
I'm still reviewing the court's ruling, so I'm sort of halfway through. But I would suspect that we would definitely be running in 2024 with the redrawn districts. It may be before that, and my expectation is that given that there may be irreparable harm by not immediately redrawing the lines, that there may be a chance that this is drawn and through a special election earlier than the 2024 election. But I fully expect the 2024 election will be with the new lines.
We have a question from D Johnson 08. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi guys, so sorry. This is Dominique Johnson from Hearst Television. Congresswoman, how in contact are you with the representatives from the other states that are facing similar issues? So like Jim Clyburn in South Carolina, representatives from North Carolina, how in concert are you guys working, trying to get this legislation through Congress?
The Congressional Black Caucus, which is 58 members strong, this is a priority. Voting rights and restoring the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is a top priority of the Congressional Black Caucus, which of course includes Congressman Clyburn, Congressman Thompson, Congressman Carter from Louisiana. There are a lot of states that may be implicated by this that are currently represented by only one majority minority district. And frankly, all of them will be affected by this decision. And we are a close-knit group of the Congressional Black Caucus. So everybody has been fully informed along the way. And clearly the representation for HR 4, the Voting Rights Advancement Act, now named after our beloved John Lewis. So it's the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which passed Congress, two Congresses, not only last Congress, but the Congress before that. So the 116th and the 117th Congress, the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which would fully restore the voting rights of 1965, was a top priority for the Democratic caucus, not just for the Congressional Black Caucus, and passed the House of Representatives. As you know, it stalled in the Senate because we couldn't get 60 votes to actually overcome the filibuster. So it wasn't even brought to the floor. I truly believe we would have had the 51 votes to actually pass it if it could have gotten on the floor. So we still have a ways to go, and this fight is far from over. And I look forward to rolling up my sleeves and continuing to get into what John would call good trouble as we continue to make sure that this country lives up to its full ideals of equality and justice for all. And in the realm of voting rights, that is definitely to have fair representation and to make sure that the voices of the minority are heard in our society. And that's critically important. It doesn't necessarily mean an African-American voice. It can be in places like Arizona and Texas, Hispanic voters, which are in the minority. And so I think that our representative government works best when we have fair and equal representation. And that's what we're fighting for.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. We have a question from Jay Casson. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sorry, that took a minute. This is Mike Cason at AL.com. Congresswoman Sewell, how concerned would you be if it falls back to the legislature to redraw the map? Do you have a preference on whether the court should do it or the legislature? And again, how concerned would you be since they drew the map that's now been thrown out?
I think that everyone will have to follow the ruling of the Supreme Court. So whether it's in the state legislature or the 3-judge panel drawing the maps, they're going to have to follow the ruling of the court. And so, I think that that the ruling is pretty clear that it should be at least 2 majority-minority districts drawn in the state of Alabama. Since we got a really good shake in the Supreme Court, I think that if I had a pension, it would probably be that the judges draw it. But I also know that this state has a say in its representation, and that's reflected in the state legislature. I just look forward to rolling up my sleeves and working with the congressional delegation and the state legislature to the extent that they're drawing the maps to make sure that they're fair maps.
Thank you.
We have a question from Paul Blumenthal. Paul, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Congresswoman. I was wondering if you have any thoughts on the fact that the Supreme Court, while they've ruled this way today, allowed this, now defunct map to be in effect in the 2022 elections. I was just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, the lower court did rule that the state house should have immediately drawn new maps, but given the judicial process, the fact that the state of Alabama appealed that to the Supreme Court meant that there was only 6 or 7 weeks before the primary elections were going to take place before the maps could be redrawn, and the whole idea was to give to give it time to go through the normal judicial process. Having said that, I think that when you really, I'm now putting on my lawyer hat, but if you really look down at the substance of what was said, I think that there could be a case that African American voters in Alabama would want this to be done swiftly, because a year and a half is left on this particular term before the 2024 term. And one could make a case that not having fair representation would give irreparable harm to the Black voters that are currently not being represented.
I think we have time for one more question, so I want to kick it over to Maddie because I see that she's had her hand up, so you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you, Congresswoman. Now, if these 2 districts drawn were to split up Selma and Birmingham, will that impact where you reside or what seat that you would choose to run for?
Well, the 7th congressional seat, while it includes Birmingham and Selma and 9 counties of the Black Belt, it is a Birmingham seat. Birmingham makes up 32% of the population of this district. And so I live in Birmingham, and I fully expect to represent the 7th congressional district and run in the 7th congressional district. Would I love it to include Selma and Marion and Wilcox County and really keep the seat that I currently have? Yes. But I know that that's not possible in order to create 2 majority districts. I just ask that it's a small price to pay to carve up my district in order to be able to have 2 majority minority districts. And so, people like John Lewis made much greater sacrifices for progress than I would have to make. So, I'm obviously very interested in how it's drawn, and hope to be, hope that it will be drawn fairly. Would love it if it still included Birmingham and parts of the Black Belt. Obviously, Selma is my hometown, but at the end of the day, it really is about progress. It's about fair representation, and it would be a small sacrifice for me to pay.
All right, thank you all again. We really appreciate you coming on. Like I said, we will make a recording of this press conference available at in your inboxes to all the folks who are subscribed to our press list. So keep an eye out for that in the next few minutes here. But thank you all. And with that, we'll close this.
Thanks, everyone.